In our last session, we saw that Jesus is the source of life through giving access to the Father, access to a relationship with God. And the next I am follows very quickly on from this, but sandwiched in between the two is one of the most familiar passages of the Bible that's so often quoted. Jesus says, "The thief comes to steal, kill and destroy, but I've come that you might have life and life to the full," or as some versions say, life in abundance. And linking between "I am the door" and Jesus' claim to be "I am the shepherd" is Jesus reflecting that the enemy wants to come and to steal and to kill and destroy. That's the purpose of what the enemy wants to do. But Jesus has another plan, and that's why he identifies as "I am the good shepherd." If you think back to the Old Testament where God revealed himself as Jehovah Roe, "I am the good shepherd," from Psalm 23, when Jesus picks up that sense of "I am the good shepherd," there's a very clear parallel between the two that wouldn't have been lost on a lot of the Jews. Remember as well that in the Old Testament, sheep were used to be a picture of the people of God, and the shepherd was the picture that God began to use to sort of explain who he wanted to be to his people. And in Ezekiel 34, we have this passage where God identifies that the shepherds who had been responsible for the people hadn't cared for the sheep properly. And as a result, he says, "I will place over them one shepherd, my servant David," or literally a shepherd from David's line. The people of the time were looking for God to send his shepherd. They were looking at the Messiah being the one to come and bring peace, fruitfulness, freedom, safety, identity, to protect them. And the image in Ezekiel 34 is that was what they were looking for God to do. So when Jesus identifies himself as "I am the good shepherd," he's clearly linking himself to fulfilling this prophecy that we see in Ezekiel 34. Do you remember the characteristics of a good shepherd? A good shepherd wants to feed the sheep, to protect the sheep, and to care for the sheep. And in this passage, we see Jesus identifying with all of those characteristics in the way that he portrays himself. And he uses this expression about laying down his life for the sheep. There is a sense of security that the sheep, being in good pasture, need to be kept safe and protected, and they need a shepherd who's going to have a commitment to them, who is going to put their interests first. And he highlights that the hired hand will run away, but actually Jesus wants to protect the sheep from the enemy who would come to steal, kill and destroy. That's where the care for the sheep comes in, because just as the hired hand would run away, Jesus knows the sheep and they know him. And he makes a point in this passage that the sheep will recognise his voice and follow him because they recognise his voice. For us today as Christians, to follow a God that we can't see is often a challenge for many people. But we can know God, and as we spend time with him by studying and reading the Bible, praying, spending time in worship with other Christians, we begin to recognise the shepherd's voice. We begin to know something of the protection and the care of the good shepherd for us. Or as Jesus puts it in this passage, the love for the sheep, that he would lay down his life because of the love that he has for the sheep. So Jesus is picking up an Old Testament image of the good shepherd and applying it to himself, clearly identifying himself with God, but also clearly identifying himself as the one to fulfill the promises that God's made. He picks up this position of the good shepherd for a reason, because he wants to show that he is the source of life through relationship, and that by laying down his life for the sheep, he allows them to find freedom and safety and security.